Hi everyone, and welcome back to Push the Point with another one of our round table chats. Today I'm joined, thank you very much guys, by Rob Catton and Jacob Hand, who, as we'll find out very shortly, have done very well at the recent World Championships. So just to give you an idea, if you're not from the UK or if you've not come across Rob and Jacob before, Rob Catton this year has a list of achievements that include Procrest 1, a first, a second, and 2 other tops. Procrest 2, a first, a second, and a top 4. He got 2 top 4s in the Road to National season, top 32 at Krakow calling, top 8 at the New Jersey calling, top 34 or 34th place at Pro Tour Lille, and has just most recently come top 8 in the World Championships. And Jacob, who I know very well, is local to me. Again, Procrest 1, a first, a second. Procrest 2, a first, and 3 other tops. Road to National season this year, 2 firsts and a top 8. He played in the Pro Tour New Jersey, came 34th in Pro Tour Lille, and then 24th in Worlds most recently. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time, especially after such a busy couple of weeks, to come and talk to us here on Push the Point. How are you feeling? How's the recovery been since Worlds?
Good, yeah. I'm still struggling with the jet lag a little bit, but and kind of riding the buzz, which I'm sure Rob is as well.
Yeah, glad to get back to normal life, and it's even a bit warmer over here these days. But yeah,
It's weird, isn't it? We got back from California and the temperature is exactly the same. Like, I feel like the weather's been just the same, which is very strange.
yeah.
It gets a bit colder at night, but
Yeah, it has been a bit chilly, bit wetter as well. Too much rain. Okay, so let's dive in, because you guys, obviously you've been testing together for a while. You've obviously both done fantastically at Worlds with a top 8 and a 24th. 2 of the highest placed UK players at the tournament. When did this all start? How did you meet?
so it was at the RTN Underworld, which I can't remember specifically when that was, but that was kind of, we'd seen each other around the scene before then, but that was the first place we'd really got to play like multiple games together. We sat next to each other because it was a draft RTN. It was we sat next to each other in draft pods and played in the finals of draft, and that's kind of how we got to talking and get to know each other. And then Rob messaged me afterwards asking if I wanted to be in a testing group, basically.
Yeah, and that was because I played Jacob. First time I played Jacob was at the Living Realms quarterfinals of their Pro Quest. It's Starvo versus Chain. And like I knew that Jacob had been doing really well with Starvo and topping a bunch of events, and I thought he was a good player. And then yeah, like Jacob said, speaking to him and playing against him and watching how he played at the RTN, just made me think this is someone I want to work with.
And that was all the way back at the beginning of Uprising season, wasn't it? It was like the first set of Uprising draft events.
Yeah, I'd done like 2 local casual drafts since then, and like a pre-release sealed. It was like so new at that point.
I actually remember being in a pod with you on that one, Rob, the middle pod, where you had an Icelander deck that was just busted. I think you were the only Icelander in the pod. And I had to play you round 1 in that pod. I was not a happy bunny.
Yeah, I took a photo of that deck, and I don't think I've drafted I don't think I've seen an Icelander deck as good as that since. Yeah.
In fact, I'm pretty sure you've not drafted Icelander since, have you? You've been Fi all the way since then.
Yeah, I keep doing the same strategy, which is you are default Fi, but then I keep having people down, passing to me who aren't Fi, so I just keep sticking with it. Yeah,
just keep going with it. Okay, so that was at the beginning of the Uprising season. You had established that you both worked fairly well together. When did you start testing in earnest, and what event came first, as it were?
It was pretty much from day one, right?
Yeah.
Because you kind of, Rob sent me this file list that he'd been messing around with, and like said, just have a look at it, see what you think. I took it to Armories and was playing around with it, and we kind of got pretty deep into talking about it then because we knew Pro Tour Lille would be coming up at some point and the RTNs before that and things. So we kind of just, as soon as we got into this group, we were just hammering ideas about how to improve the deck, and it kind of worked out that we were just on fire from the start of Uprising until the end of Uprising, pretty much.
Yeah, and I guess things kept changing in the metagame. Like at one point, obviously Prism was still around,
Yeah.
and that meant there was like less Oldhim, and we had like more Briar to contend with because there was less Oldhim. So like trying to figure out like what's the best configuration against all these things. Like, is there anything better? And we just couldn't find anything. Any reason why not to play Fi really is what I can remember.
And right at the beginning, you still had stubby hammerers as well, didn't you? I think it was Utrecht where they got rid of that. That was like Halcyon days.
Yeah.
You could have these crazy combo turns with Art of War and stubby hammerers and make it go for ridiculous amounts of damage. What kept you on Fi when that got banned? Like, you didn't lose faith at all. I remember speaking to both of you intermittently, and you were both resolute that Fi was the way forward.
I guess, well, Shuko does a really good job at, like, you do roughly get the same amount of damage out of Shuko that you do Stubby Hammers, obviously spread out across the game. But yeah, I think just lack of, you look at like the other aggro decks and things like that, and like Briar and like Icelander became much more of a thing. I remember that was a huge part of it. Icelander became much more of a deck once Prism went away.
Yes.
And because of Belittle, Fi just had an amazing matchup into Icelander, which was a huge part of why we just stuck with it, and just couldn't find a reason to not to play it. Really, I think that was it. Jacob, what do you think?
So specifically around the Stubbies ban, I wasn't at Krakow where obviously it went out. Utrecht, sorry, I wasn't there, but Rob did go, and we built the deck together before he went, and he did quite well at the Calling Champions event thing that was
on the Friday.
Utrecht, but then obviously the decks that were really the breakout ones were these huge combo Stubby Hammer decks that we believed we had an okay game into. But I suppose what I'm driving at is our deck wasn't reliant on Stubby Hammerers. It was kind of a crutch in certain matchups, like against Briar, you could just pop it and have the turn to get over their Mount Heroic or something. But realistically, it could have been Shuko, and our deck was putting the same amount of damage out. We weren't stringing these like 40 damage turns together with Stubby Hammerers. So when it went, we were kind of glad that we could run a 2-block piece of armor and have the excuse to play that again, because we like playing it a bit more defensive than I think a lot of Fis do. We have a lot higher density of 3 blocks and things, and so matchups that Fi was struggling against, like Bravo, for instance, at the time was quite. People were hyping up Bravo a lot and saying he was going to be good. I think we had a really good matchup into Bravo compared to the other Fi lists. So I think when Stubbies went, we were like, oh, that doesn't really hurt our version of the deck at all, so there's no reason to stop playing it.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. And having seen your deck in action a number of times throughout the process, you definitely do seem to block a bit more than most sort of all-out Fis, and it's done you well. So just tell me a bit more then. Roughly, how many people were involved in your testing throughout the Uprising season, as it were, and how did that go?
I guess it started really with like Nationals is the thing that springs to mind. I remember myself wanting a really small team for Nationals, because when you've got to play an event that's only 96 players, any advantage you can get from a team, obviously the bigger the team is, the less advantage it's going to be because they're the people you're playing against. So I have a couple of friends who are local to me, James and Matt, James Thorgan and Matt Duggan, who were both like practicing for Nationals and stuff, and wanted to have Jacob involved as well. And then we had a couple of other guys, I think, local to you too. So Matt Light and Tom Hall. I think Tom's maybe more southern. So we wanted to keep the group really, really small. And I think we ended up on slightly different decks. I can't remember exactly what Matt played. I know Tom played Oldhim. But yeah, so I guess we just want to keep it as small as possible,
Yeah.
just to keep it as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you went through that testing process, obviously, the deck changes, and that's the whole point of testing. I know you've done a deck tech, Rob, with Alex from Fabled Academy. So if anyone's interested in looking at the top 8 Fi deck that Rob took to Worlds, then that's already been documented. But just tell me a bit more about the deck building process. You knew the hero you wanted to build, and you, from the sounds of it, you had an idea how you wanted the deck to work. What was the process that went into finalizing cards and including and excluding certain options?
Lots and lots of spreadsheets.
Yeah.
So we kind of had a channel in the testing Discord that we use that we reserved for Fi, and that was where we spoke about all things Fi. And we pinned each one of us who was playing Fi at big events had a Fi spreadsheet where we would kind of put our most recent iteration of the deck and then like open it up for comments, and people could come in and tell us what cards they liked, what cards they didn't like. At this point, we were all kind of on slight variations of the same deck because some of us liked cards better than others, and then we'd have chats about those cards and which ones we wanted to include. And we did a load of different things to kind of eliminate certain cards. At one point, we were highlighting in yellow all the cards that were 3 blocks, and then we had a counter that like counted how many 3 blocks we had in the deck, and we were comparing like what the right amount of 3 blocks were and how that was negatively impacting the way the deck ran. We were doing things like, you know, mapping out full sideboard guides and trying to slot cards into each matchup, and if that didn't line up, then we would have to go back and rework what cards were in the sideboard, because we were like, oh, we only have, you know, we have 10 slots, but we only have 9 cards that go in against this matchup. Where are we getting this 10th card from? I don't know if Rod wants to pick up after that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the spreadsheet now, or at least mine, and there's a bunch of different tabs. It starts at version 2.1 snapshot, so I guess that's a while ago. And then version 2.0 was post Utrecht. They've all got so version numbers go up, like little things like playing flame waves and stuff, and then post Prism is version 3. Version 3.1 is World's Prep. I think we ended up on version 3.3 was finally the one that we went with. But yeah, like Jacob said, FabDB was really useful just to keep versions of decks stored in that. So we'd have that in the spreadsheet as well, a link to it, so someone could play it on Teleshare. But yeah, like Jacob said, just highlighting things like how many blue block threes are we playing, and how many cards have we got that are like reliant on other cards and stuff like that is really useful to see, and I found in spreadsheet form.
I guess if you're used to seeing data written in spreadsheets, that's a really useful way of keeping track of everything. And I think what struck me when I saw your list properly for Worlds was the number of blues you had, and the inclusion of Engulfing Flamewave, which is obviously a super powerful card, but a lot of Fis don't want to play it because it costs 2. Were there any other big decisions, or even how did you come to those big decisions for those sort of key special cases?
For the blues, I think it was Jacob at one point said we were talking about how many blues to play and stuff, and I think it was Jacob said about the ratio that you want in draft of blues. So you have a 30-card deck in draft, and you want most people want 8 blues.
Yeah.
If you double the number of cards, that means you should presumably want 16 blues, but nobody does that. People
Sound
play,
logic,
10 or 12. So that was a big thing for us, and having stuff everyone was playing Belittle, but then there was loads of lists that weren't making any use of the extra resources. So when you're playing against things that weren't ice, you'd go get your Minnowism and you'd just have 2 or 3 extra resources and nothing to actually spend on them, which leads into some other deck building choices, didn't it, Jacob?
I think Flamewave's an interesting one to talk about, because I'm sure there'll be people watching this that remember me saying that card was terrible when we first started playing Fi. And I will stand by that, because when Stubby Hammers was legal, obviously it wasn't a 3 attack, it was really expensive, it didn't fit into your combo, or even after Stubby Hammers, when it wasn't that great of a card, but then we kind of realized that we needed some game against Briar and decks like the other aggro decks, like what made us beat other aggro decks. And losing Stubby Hammers, we obviously lost that advantage we have there of just having 6 damage on our arms whenever we need it to push over. So we were looking, and a lot of our deck building is like, what on hits can we present against these other aggro decks, which is why, excuse me, we've stuck on Mask of Momentum in pretty much every matchup except Oldham and Icelander, where you really aren't getting use out of it, and tried to like squeeze in as many of these like kind of on hits as we can. So like Engulfing Flame Wave is a great on hit, Snatch is a great on hit, and just things that make these Briar decks get punished for like holding them out heroic or things like that.
Well, even things like Mounting Anger is an extra 1 damage if it hits. Like Fi has a number of on hits that you don't really think about until they're there on the chain, and they're all 4 damage, aren't they? Or 5 if you look at Engulfing Flame Wave. It was what struck me about the deck not your deck, but a Fi deck when I started playing the heroes. Actually, you've got a number of on hits that you don't have in other heroes. Like Briar doesn't really have many on hits unless you've got Force of Nature out, or Viserai doesn't really have many on hits. He just wants to make Rune Chance and hit you with split damage. So it makes people maybe want to block when they shouldn't and not block when they should, and it asks some interesting questions.
Yeah, and I
think go for it.
So I think Flame Wave is like the perfect embodiment of that, in making a person's turn as awkward as possible. Because like, if you start with it, it's a 2 for 5, and if they don't block it and it hits a Lava Burst, like that's so bad for them. But if they do block it, it was a 2 for 5 with Go again, and we really don't feel that bad about it. And then we're presenting like 3 more attacks that they then have to block if they don't want us to get Mask of Momentum.
Yeah.
And it just creates these like decision points that people just can't work out. And it happens a lot of times where you can see them thinking about it for ages, and then they kind of just give up thinking about it and don't block it. And they're just like, what's the worst that could happen? And then you flip a Blaze Headlong, or you flip a Lava Burst, or you flip a Snatch, and that's the worst that can happen.
Yeah, and that's sort of what led us to putting Ancestral Empowerment back in the deck as well, I think, because them 3, along with Tempo, along with Mask of Momentum, and like you say, Mounting Anger and stuff, got all these really good ninja on hits. And it does make our deck less consistent, but I think in Utrecht we fell foul of that. Like, we built our Fi deck in Utrecht to be great against Bravo,
right?
But that was in the pre-Bravo metagame, so we thought there'd be more Bravo than there was, because Bravo's good against the 2-block Fi build, but there wasn't much right Bravo there. So we've got this like quite conservative Fi deck that's good against it, but it wasn't there yet. So we wanted to make sure we didn't do that again, where we were just being really consistent but having a low-powered deck.
Yeah.
Hence cards like Ancestral Empowerment and Flame Wave, which are a bit less consistent, but you just need to take some risks, really.
That's a fair point. I think. Was there any point at which you thought about putting Kodachis in the deck, for example? Was there any point that came up in conversation?
Yeah, I think just before Nationals, possibly, or maybe just before Lille, we were considering it, and we kind of came out last minute. Obviously, people in the UK Discord talking about Lille and stuff were mentioning these Kodachi Fi lists, and we kind of put a few together and tried to make them work, but then realised we just weren't going to have enough time before the specific event to test it properly. So we were a bit concerned that like we just weren't playing the best version of the deck at Lille specifically. I think we were worried, but then we actually played the deck at Lille, and obviously no Kodachi Fi list did well at that particular event. And so we kind of just discounted it at that point and moved on to just focusing on Emberblade. At the time we still believed that Emberblade was the better weapon, and then obviously Nationals happened and the Kodachi Fi ended up winning. George did very well with that deck, so we were a bit like, should we go for that? But then at the same time, King of the Side events Rob got the PTI with the Emberblade list, and we were like, well, there probably is still quite a lot of merit in this Emberblade list, and obviously that event didn't have draft, and Nationals did.
Yeah.
So we were kind of just stuck with our guns at that point and stuck on Emberblade from there.
And Flamewave as well. Like I managed to go Flamewave into Flamewave in the finals, which made us really like that card.
The I think what was it, 9 or 10 chain links in the final. That is
I know that I drew 9 cards that turn, and started with 4 in my hand. So yeah, it was a lot of chain links. I think it might even be more than 9 chain links, to be honest.
it's crazy, and it just exemplifies the power of the deck when it gets going. It can just, even without Kodachis, you can get eight chain links fairly easily off. You mentioned another card, Take the Tempo, which again has fallen in and out of favour with Ninja decks lately. But it's another powerful on hit, right? If you hit and it triggers, if you've hit 3 times in a turn, then you get another card in Banish that you can use not just this turn but next turn as well. Do you play all 3 copies? Is it a 2 of, or 2 of? And do you find that people respect it again, like Flamewave, or do they just take the chance?
I think it's very rare that
Yeah.
that card is ever live enough for it to matter, because obviously we play 2 of it, and like your resources sometimes don't add up
Yeah.
to it. But when it like I've only hit with it maybe 5 or 6 times in in testing and at major events and stuff, and a lot of the time it's a 3 block. A lot of the time it's a 2 card hand against like an Icelander or a Lexi that's locked you out with Frostbites or something. And
1 for 5.
that's why we liked the card, because it has this flexibility
Nice.
of being a good finisher and a 3 block and a decent 2 card hand because you're just swinging for 5. But then when you get the effect, it is obviously really insane. Most of the time we end up hitting a blue. That's why I've certainly hit the most of that card. But even that's not bad.
It's an extra chain link, eh?
Yeah.
The one in my top 8 game against the Fire Mirror, when he let me hit with Mask of Momentum on my turn 1. Oh, sorry, my turn 2, and I draw him to take the tempo, hit him with it. He takes that as well. I flip a red flame wave for next turn. Like that was, I felt like I'd won the game on that. When that happened.
And then for anyone that hasn't seen the result of that game, the flame wave on the next turn did hit, but unfortunately flipped an Art of War, which I think is still probably haunts you.
Honestly, like, people think like I was like, going to come out like getting like really disheartened, because obviously I'm pretty sure if I hit any attack I win that game. But all I can think of is like of how much of a hypocrite I would be, because I absolutely annihilated a 5 like a few rounds prior because of Flame Wave just hitting a Blaze Headlong.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
You gotta look at it on the whole, really.
Yeah. Well, it does have its ups and downs, but I think in your deck it definitely has more ups than downs.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think that's going to be helpful for a lot of people who are maybe thinking about looking ahead to next year and thinking about how they're going to go about building a deck for big competitions. I think you've mentioned a number of key things, like you're keeping track of the cards that you're including in the deck. You're keeping track of their performance over a number of events, whether that be armories or ProQuests or Road to Nationals. And then, as you've said, you've got a limited group of people that's not too big, not too bloated, and you're able to float some ideas and maybe use people as a sounding board. Are there any other top tips for people that are maybe looking at taking a step up to a bit more competitive play?
I'm about to do the exact same process again,
because
all the Katsu cards that have just come out, so all these Crouching Tiger stuff, like all the cards that go along with that. And I remember that when me and Jacob first started looking at Fire, like we put all of the cool cards in, so we put all the Phoenix forms in, and all the Phoenix Flames, and all the Flame Call Awakenings, and Rise from the Ashes, and all that stuff. All the cards that say Phoenix Flame on, put them all in and see what happens. And we cut and cut and cut and cut and cut, and then we ended up with one Phoenix Flame on our list, no cards that care about it.
Right.
And like with the Katsu stuff that's coming out now, like I'm going to start with everything. Start with everything that mentions Crouching Tigers, and then some basically throw a lot of stuff at once, see what sticks really. So then keep going back and back and back and trimming until you get the point where it's like, is this actually worth doing or not? So that's what I'm going to try to do.
That sounds very
Yeah, I think
reasonable.
it's worth saying to people that don't be afraid to try cards. Like never just discount a card because someone on YouTube said it's
Mm,
bad, or someone has said it's bad. Try it out, play it at local armories. That like you might think it's not good testing, but just playing in real life and jamming games is great. Sticking on a deck, even if like you're not sure it's the absolute 1% best deck in
yeah,
the meta, like you are vastly better at a deck that you have had like 6 months experience with and
yeah,
is like a tier 2 deck than you are with a deck that you picked up on the day of the event. So definitely stick to your guns. I think us staying on Fi
yeah.
since basically its release really helped us a lot. And yeah, try not to rely on Talishar too much, I think is a thing that I've seen a lot of people fall afoul of. Talishar is a fantastic resource. We used it for testing a lot, but mainly within our group, we just test against each other on Talishar. There's a lot of different people that can use
Mm,
Talishar, and a lot of those people are perhaps not preparing for the same level of tournament that you are. And so you will get matched up against a lot of random decks that is not going to represent the metagame at a tournament. And so just like be wary of that and don't do 200 games on Talishar, have like an 80% win rate, and assume that you come up with the best deck ever.
I've
y-
got a good one as well. We were most afraid of Oldhim. Like that was like the deck that in CC like we thought not like it's a bad matchup per se, but like it's definitely one that is the most difficult to play. And we had in our house, Simon, as you know, we had
yeah,
Francesco Georgia from down south in the UK, and I remember asking him, like, just chatting to him on Discord, saying, like, what is like the most, how is this card when you play against it? So I was
yeah,
asking, like, is Stormcall Awakening a card that you're particularly bothered about? And he's like, not really. I just changed how I play because that deck usually blocks poorly. That version of Fire usually blocks
yeah.
poorly, so he changed how he plays and stuff. And that's what made us end up with Ancestral Empowerment in our deck against Alden
Mm,
because that was basically Francesco's idea. So I think it's quite cool to find if you've got a matchup that you're struggling with, find a good player on it and ask them like, "What's the best thing I can be doing against you?" That certainly helps.
so I was just going to add there as well. It does. It's sometimes, as you've mentioned, you had other players in your group play different decks like Oldham. It definitely helps to have within the group different archetypes of player, so that you know when you are testing against these decks, you're playing against good Oldham players or good Icelander players, rather than similar to Talishar, anyone off the street that may give you a bit of false hope.
Absolutely, yeah.
We definitely had that problem where we were originally trying to test against Oldham
Mm,
for Leo, and we didn't fix this before Leo, and that ended up coming back to bite us a little bit. Where like one of us would just play an Oldham deck that we'd found on FabDB and test against it, and
yeah,
we do all right. But realistically, I wasn't playing that Oldham deck very well.
yeah,
Rob probably wasn't playing that Oldham deck as well as someone like say Francesco. And so after Leo, we kind of realized, yeah, we just basically haven't tested into Oldham, even
mm,
though we had played a bunch of games, but it's not real Oldham. So that's when we contacted Francesco and obviously got ask an expert kind of
yeah.
thing.
Got a bit more
That really
involved.
helped. Like I had a few games with him before Blitz as well. That really helped me nail down my Blitz matchup and stuff.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, the deck obviously did well. The Phi deck for sure did well at Worlds. But what was your combined record in CC?
So I was 4-1, Rob went 5-0, so
Okay,
9-1 total.
not
I
bad.
guess 9-2, 9-2 if you include my
If you
quarterfinals.
include the top eight
True, yeah.
match. I mean,
That was a mirror.
and I found it interesting that you then played completely different decks for Blitz. Was Blitz much of a focus, or was it more of a just personal project and go off and do whatever you wanted?
This was tough because I don't know about Rob. Obviously, everyone I'm sure knows Rob's a chain hard stuck guy. He's been in chain since release. So that was always an option for him. I was, through all the skirmishes that I went to and everything, I was playing Fi. I was doing Fi in
Yeah.
both formats. I thought Fi was really good in Blitz. I had a lot of reps into Fi.
Mm.
So I was feeling quite good about this split format. And then obviously the ban list comes out and
Yeah.
Pouncing Lynx goes, and I think that deck gets like significantly worse to the point of unplayability
I would
without
agree.
Pouncing Lynx in Blitz. So that really scuppered my plans quite soon before
Okay.
Worlds, and I didn't have the experience on chain that Rob does to just instantly switch to that deck like
Yeah.
he could. So I kind of needed something new to work out, and Rob can probably attest. I was getting quite stressed about what the hell I
Yeah.
would play in Blitz. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have a backup deck at all. Eventually, I just like had a bunch of the legendaries for Icelander, so played a couple
Okay.
games at local armory, and was like,
I,
okay, it was kind of clicking together, so I went with that.
I
But
remember the
my
first week you brought it and destroyed me.
yeah,
I was like, oh, okay, this is new.
but yeah, my confidence level for Blitz was way low going into Worlds.
And how did you do on Icelander?
3-2.
Okay.
So and the loss, one of the losses was a mirror, one of them was a prism, which is like a hard
Yeah.
counter. So I really couldn't have asked for any better given the
Nice.
stress that I was feeling going into it.
And Rob, you went with Chain.
Yeah, I went 3-2 as well. I played against three Oldims, two Icelanders,
Right.
which isn't. I don't mind the Icelanders, but the Oldims are not exactly what I want to be playing against with Chain. Um, but yeah, I expected a lot of Icelander,
Yeah.
and the list that I built for Chain played 15 blues, 4 belittle, so I was
Hmm.
like really trying to lean into beating Icelander. We made a little bit of a mistake in our preparation though, because we're trying to figure out what equipment does Chain want to play
Yeah.
into Icelander. Um, we ended up on. I ended up thinking like you definitely need creepers because of hypothermia. You need some AB, but then I was also playing like a bunch of armor as well. I was playing Crown, Grasp, Null Rune Robe, Creepers,
Yeah.
and that was when I was playing against Jacob. It was doing really well. But one thing we didn't think of, and one thing that lost me a feature match against Daniel, who was playing Icelander, was he looked at my equipment when the game started,
Yeah.
and he didn't say it out loud, but basically what he thought was, okay, I just want to attack.
Yeah.
Um, so I've got Crown of Providence and Grasp without Lightning. Because he just never attacks and just leans into the arcane
Yeah.
damage, it becomes a lot harder. And it was helpful because I realised that's why I lost to him. And then the next round I played Ebb and Fold. I think I basically realised that you can't afford to play Crown of Providence.
Right.
So if I was going to go first, I was going to play Ebb and Fold and
Yeah.
go in second Crown of
Chronicle
Dichotomy.
dichotomy. Yeah.
Um, and that was like I say, it was a failure in a way of our playtesting because we didn't like try and solve the problem, like trying to think about outside the box sort of thing.
I remember we had
And
a quick discussion. We like the two of us had a discussion in a taxi when we were in San Jose about should we play armor, should we play spell void, should we play AB, and I think with the number of two main types of Icelander decks out there, weren't there? There was like the Bulllander attacks and arcane, and there's a solid arcane version. Even if they are the Bulllander with the attacks, as you say, if they see your equipment and they see you've got armor, they'll just not attack you, or they'll just try and push through arcane. So it's a benefit, and I'm sure Jacob can attest a benefit to that deck, the way you can pivot mid-game on how you attack and how you go about stalling a chain deck. And I found the Icelander matchup as chain very, very tricky because a good Icelander player will make you pay for it.
yeah, certainly tricky. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong for Chen.
But I did appreciate your input and make sure I put the creepers back in because that card is hypothermia was a card, and creepers definitely did something against that. So yeah, what were we going to say?
I was going to say it's quite nice moving forward as Chain and Blitz. There's no more hypothermia.
Yeah, Jacob's not enjoying it though.
Stormstriders, I'm buzzing.
Well, that's true. You've got those back. I mean,
I've never played it with Stormstriders before, so really excited for that.
we'll come back to the Blitz inclusion in Worlds as we talk about the event. But yeah, so we've talked about how you settled on decks. CC was your main priority. Blitz came a bit later, maybe. What did the Worlds event? Firstly, what did it mean to you both to be there? And then how did it compare to any preconceptions that you took out with you?
So I suppose having played a few card games in the past,
Yeah.
like Yu-Gi-Oh, Dragon Ball Super card game, Cardboard Vanguard. Like, there's not many that I haven't played other than Magic, really. And you kind of see these I've been to like YCSs for Yu-Gi-Oh, which are like their equivalent of Pro Tour kind of things, and like EWCQ stuff like that. And then you obviously have Worlds, which is this like cream of the crop top thing that as an average Joe player from when I started playing when I was like 16 until I was like 22 was just something that I would never have thought was achievable ever for like me, because I just wasn't on that level. I didn't put that much time into it or anything. So then getting into Flesh and Blood and like being able to grind up all this XP and elo and stuff, and like actually realizing maybe wasn't too bad at this one, and then kind of getting to the point after like just before nationals of like, okay, this is what you need to do to qualify for Worlds. That actually seems like achievable for me, and like just going for it and then getting there. It was all very surreal, because like in other games it was just such an aspiration that I would never get to, and like I'm not going to say it felt easy in this game, but like it just kind of happened naturally through me just like playing lots of events and accruing elo and XP and getting into that top 50 window and stuff, because I didn't get through with the PTI. So yeah, just going there was like, wow, it was an honor to be there. I felt really privileged to be able to go, and like I'd finally achieved what I'd never been able to do in those other games.
I thought it was a really good juxtaposition, actually. As Jacob and I travelled down to the airport together, and while we were in the queue for security, you bumped into some old acquaintances from Yu-Gi-Oh who were off to a different event in California, I think Pasadena. And I just thought your whole demeanour changed when you realised how far you'd come from their position to your current position.
Yeah, for sure. Like, obviously, I planned to go to an American YCS just before lockdown happened, and like anyone can enter those. You can just travel and go into them. And I was like, they're traveling for this open entry event, but they're very good players. Don't get me wrong, but I was just like, oh, I'm actually going to something I've been invited to. This feels amazing. Like so much different, so much better than having gone to that American YCS would have felt if I'd done it 2 years ago. I'm like so happy to be on this side of the fence, I suppose, is the term.
Oh. Awesome. What about you, Rob? What did it mean to you?
I'm not so much a sentimental person, but like I really like. So I played Magic the Gathering for like 12, 13 years or whatever, and I think I played about 5 or 6 Pro Tours for that. And like qualifying for them always held like a nice level of prestige. Like when you come back and you roll out your Pro Tour player mats, and someone says, "Oh, you've played on the Pro Tour and that," and you're like, "Yeah, yeah," and they're like, "How many have you played?" And you tell them, and they're sort of like, "That's a little bit shocked," and stuff. That was sometimes nice, but and yeah, it feels really cool to have played the first 3 for Flesh and Blood, and just want to make sure to keep it going. With I'm hoping the Elo hasn't yet gone on, but I'm hoping that I can just re-qualify through that. To be honest, but yeah, it's really nice just to be able to play, a game that we all really enjoy playing, and be able to play it for such a large amount of money as well. Because
it's crazy, isn't it?
Because I like poker, but I couldn't imagine sitting and playing that game for the amount of time that you need to play it to be good at it, because it's so dull. Like there's 52 cards. If you play in 10 years, there'll be the same 52 cards in the game. Like it just, with this, like, it's always changing. There's more things to explore.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just really good that our hobby makes us some money sometimes as well. So yeah.
Some more than others, and obviously you both done very well at World and funded the next few events, maybe. So, what were how did Worlds differ from your sort of preconceptions? Then we've talked about actually being able to go to a Worlds event, and I'm in the same camp as you. Like it's a big honor to be able to turn up to one of these things. How did the event itself compare to your sort of mental model?
It was so I was kind of basing it on Pro Tour New Jersey, which I thought was amazing. I like that event felt really special. The pack that we got at the start, that was such a surprise. I remember because Trip came out with the half final now, and everyone was like, "Oh, where'd you get that printed?" And he was like, "No, they just gave it me." And we were like, "Oh, what? No way!" Like,
complete
we only
surprise.
found out in the queue what we were getting and everything, and then the hall was really nice. Like the player reception was really cool and everything, and like the candlelit tables and stuff, and it just felt really special. And I was like, wow, Worlds has got to be like
Yeah.
immense considering what Pro Tour New Jersey was. And unfortunately, it just really didn't live up to that hype for me. Like the player reception, the queue was so long that me and Rob just didn't bother going in. I know you
Took us an hour to get in.
and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, we just went elsewhere, and the fact that you couldn't get the goodies the day before, but then you had to go in queue with like everyone else to get the
Yeah.
mat and stuff because they'd ordered the mats online. None of the stuff we got in the player pack was exclusive.
Yeah.
You could get it through like the calling registration or just buy it separately if you wanted to. The event hall not being in the conference center, kind of being outside. It was it wasn't bad. I think the event was run well and
Yeah.
like well enough anyway, and was fine. The vendors that were there were really cool. The artists were nice
Yeah.
and everything, and the goodies that were given out were great. It just didn't meet expectations.
Yeah, basically, I agree with everything Jacob said. I become less and less bothered about it over the weekend because I was
Yeah.
doing well, so I
Yeah.
just sort of forgot and was rose-tinted glasses from there on out. But yeah, like I was bitching about it. Everybody we would listen, to be honest. And yeah, like the venue just looked like a massive metal tent, and it was freezing. Like the toilet situation was a bit naff. I think the banquet situation was deplorable by them. Like it was just a cash grab
Yeah.
to get more people into that thing, and like the fact that you queued, Simon, for as long as you did, and you got in and there was no food left is
Yeah.
just disgusting. For someone who's qualified for World, like I think you deserve better. And yeah, but I think James White I've heard that when he walked into the venue, he was like, "What's this?"
Yeah.
Maybe that's a rumor, but yeah, I'm hoping that venue choice is yeah a little bit better for the next ones.
Yeah, I think you've both made some very good points, a lot of which I agree with, and I think there have been a number of people I've spoken to since we've got back that have written to LSS to sort of not complain, but sort of say this was meant to be the flagship event for the whole year, and it didn't feel as special as the first Pro Tour, which is what you said, Jacob. I think Pro Tour New Jersey being their first pro level event felt like if that had been the stepping stone, then that was just such a good sign, and it maybe hasn't kept up with that. And I don't know whether it's LSS or their sort of tournament organisers, Channel Fireball and Tournament Centre in Europe, whether which party is at fault. But yeah, there were definite things that maybe could have been done better. Let's leave it there. But I think from my point of view, the thing that redeemed the event were the people, and it was an amazing chance to meet some of the players I've played online, some of the content creators I've seen over the past couple of years. I'm clinging to the fact that actually the people made it better. I don't know if that rings true with either of you, but yeah, I'm trying to look on the positive side.
I think our house was a shining example of that. I think, especially for some people, like obviously Hamish very well.
Yeah.
I know Rob quite well, and I know you fairly well, but like from my perspective, I didn't really know Francesco very well.
Yeah.
I didn't really know Hamish all that well. And just like the kind of camaraderie we built over that weekend was like a highlight of Worlds as well.
I think it's like a mini snapshot of the whole community, isn't it? People coming together in the language of LSS to play games in flesh and blood, and just getting on because this is a common interest and we all enjoy playing the game and we all have different views on the game and we come from slightly different perspectives, but actually we're all decent human beings and we get on. It was a really nice house to be a part of, and I wanted to say thank you for having us, Hamish and I, stay with you. So let's start to think. What's that?
We'll get you a bed each next.
Well, that was I mean, Hamish thought his luck was in, but yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see about next time. Let's try and finish on a high. Like what, Jacob? You can start us off. What was your biggest highlight for Worlds?
So I'm sure everyone who was there with me will be able to attest that I was absolutely miserable at the end of round 4. I'd gone 1-2 in draft and I'd lost my first round of CC. I was like, oh my god, I've built this up for ages and I've just completely beansed it, and it's all gone wrong. I was inconsolably upset and just thought like my tournament was over and that I'd wasted such a massive opportunity. And then, Rob had a word with me, and I messaged the group chat of local players. Shout out to the Unmovables, like Mitch, Jack, Barry, David, Joe, all those lot, and like they were just sending me like reassurance, like it'd be okay, and like everyone. It just felt like everyone I knew was behind me at this point when I was at like my lowest of the weekend. They just like lifted me back up, and then I won the next 4 CC rounds that day, finished X3, which was still live for top 8. I was like, okay, let's just go to this draft and see what happens. 3-0'd that, and was like, oh, it's still happening. And then 2 more wins in Blitz, which I was really worried about. So I'm still X3. I've just gone on like a 9-win streak, and I'm like, oh my god, it could actually happen. Unfortunately, then I got matched into Prism, and it went a bit downhill from there. But the fact that I was like still live for money at that point in the tournament after having such an awful start was just like the kind of redemption story for myself, and like knowing that all those people were behind me and like helped me pick myself back up and get on it, and I actually delivered and felt like I didn't let anyone down, including myself. I'd set the goal at top 64, managed to make top 32, so was just beyond chuffed at that point.
It was a proper emotional roller coaster, like especially within the house. Like we had people doing well and not so well in the house, and it trying to catch up at the end of every day. It was really interesting to see how people were feeling. And I do remember seeing you after the draft, and your face was a picture. So I'm glad you got back on the horse. And I know you had a game against Hamish in one of your earlier rounds where you managed to beat him, unfortunately for him. But you were both sort of giving each other a talking to because you were both in a similarly down situation.
I think apologies, but also thank you. Doing that helped me get back on it a lot, because he was kind of, after that unfortunate loss, in exactly the same position I'd been in like 3 rounds ago, but I'd had 3 hours to kind of process it in my head, and then talking to him about how to help him get through it really helped me. Like, okay, you need to do that as well, and you need to follow your own words and stick with it. And I also, again, it was just another person I didn't want to let down, because obviously I just kind of knocked Hamish out of top 8 contention. I was still, and I was like, I need to make sure I do it like for the boys now.
I have a feeling we're going to get a significantly less sentimental answer from Rob. But what was your highlight for the weekend?
Well, mine's fairly unsurprising, to be honest. But I guess the main thing for me was that I managed to convert, obviously going 8-0 on the first day. I felt a lot of pressure on me, mainly from myself, like thinking, like, this is just an insane opportunity. And given it in Lille at the last Pro Tour, I was 7-1 after the first day.
Yeah.
And ended up coming not even top 32. So I was a bit like, oh god, I just really want to make sure I actually probably convert here. There's 8 rounds on the second day. I need to go 4-4 to make top 8. I got 1 and 2 in the first draft, and I'm like, oh my god, like, I'm just like, because all I can think about is just, God, just grind these next few wins. Like, I don't care where they come from. It just matters that I get 3 more from the next 5 rounds. And yeah, I made it so stressful for myself, because like, it gets to the point where I need to win 1 of my last 2 rounds, and I'm like, oh, I can win 1 of my next 2 rounds, and then I play against an Oldham player who goes first, fuses an Oakenhold on turn 0, and red pummels it and gets my carrying husk when I didn't even block with it. I was just like, I'm trying to make top 8, and like, this is the draw I have to play against. And then for my last round in the final one, my final win, and then I get called to a feature match. I'm walking over, and I can see on the monitor there's a picture of Chain and Versus, and then a picture of Alden, and I'm like, oh god, like, I think it's Alden again. But yeah, thankfully it was a much easier game, that one, and so yeah, nothing overly sentimental, to be honest. It was just, I'm just really thankful that I got lucky at the right times, and I feel like I played well. I feel like me and Jacob prepared almost exclusively by ourselves for this event.
Right.
And we were the top two finishing UK players playing the exact same list. I think that speaks volumes, to be honest. And I'm really proud of us for both doing that. And yeah, I just want to keep it going into the next year, I guess, and
Vindication.
keep the testing group small. So that's the plan.
Nice. Well, yeah, I think you've both done incredibly well, and knowing or having come across you both at different events, you're obviously good players. It's nice to see that talent transfer into practice, into testing, and into doing well at the big events. So well done to both of you. It was a pleasure to be part of that Airbnb house for the weekend, and it's been a pleasure to speak to you today. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to Push the Point. Is there anything you want to say before we sign off?
Just thank you for having us, and obviously the two biggest supporters of us were Mad Dog Duggan and Jimmy Chimpers back in the Leeds, Rob's good mates. Thank you to the Unmovables, local Nottingham people, for supporting me specifically and just like putting up with me at Armories every week. And thank you to you guys for the amazing podcast that you do and the content that you provide to the community.
I've got to give a shout out to Lila for being so supportive and staying up really late watching me. And
awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. Have a great evening, and we look forward to seeing how you get on in the next couple of months.
cheers.
Cheers, guys.